When you come across one of these labels at the end of a hadith, do you actually use them or at least understand the intended meaning? I mean, if sahih, which means authentic, and hasan, which means good, are two different categories, does that mean that a hasan hadith is not authentic or true, or that the authentic hadith is not good? And why is there a difference between a weak hadith and a fabricated one? If both of them are rejected, why give them different names? Aren't they the same thing? And there are many other terms that you've probably read or heard somewhere when dealing with a hadith, which might seem confusing or overwhelming to a beginner. This confusion ends today, inshallah. In this video, we'll understand the most important hadith terminology that any Muslim needs to navigate any hadith with confidence, inshallah. So, first of all, any hadith consists of two parts. One, the hadith itself. We call it matn, which is the content of the narration or the quote from the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. Then we have the chain of narrators, which we call sanad. This line of narrators starts at the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and ends at the compiler, like Imam Ahmad or Al-Bukhari, who tracked down and compiled the hadith in their books. Now, in order for a scholar to determine if he can accept a hadith or not, they first need to check 5 criteria to be able to grade any hadith. These 5 criteria are 1. Uprightness, 2. Precision, 3. The chain of transmission, 4. Anomaly, 5. Hidden defects. Let's understand each one of these criteria as they make understanding the hadith terminology much easier, inshallah. Number 1. Uprightness, or al-adala. This refers to the narrator's character and integrity. Was this narrator known to be truthful, credible? Did they avoid major sins? Were they known for honesty, piety, and good conduct, and so on? And scholars didn't guess who was upright and who wasn't. This was peer-reviewed. A narrator only gets certified as upright if another known scholar testified to it. Naturally, this uprightness is a spectrum. Some narrators are much more credible than others, and some narrators are known to be liars. This study of the narrator's life and biography is a separate branch of knowledge called al-jarh wa ta'dil. Number 2. Precision. Having good character alone isn't enough. Someone can be completely honest and still have a poor memory. So you also need a flawless memory as well. That's why the second condition is called dabt, or precision. It refers to how accurately a narrator preserved the hadith, either by memorizing it perfectly or by writing it down and protecting the copy from being altered. This is also a spectrum. There are those with incredible memory, and there are also those who are known to have an imperfect memory, and some have weaker memories. So, where a narrator is positioned on this spectrum affects the grade of the hadith. Number 3. The chain of transmission, or the sanad. And this criteria checks the continuity of the chain of narration, and if every narrator in a certain chain has heard the hadith directly from the person above him, so that there is a link. There can be absolutely no missing links. If historical records show that a narrator was born after his supposed teacher died, or that they lived at the same time but they never actually met, then there is a broken link. And a broken link significantly affects the grading of the hadith. Number 4. Anomaly. The fourth criteria checks if the hadith contains any anomalies or shudud. So, if we, for example, have 4 perfect chains of narrators reporting the same hadith, and 3 of them tell it one way, but the 4th uses slightly different wording, that one different version, even from a reliable chain of narrators, is considered anomalous or shadh. It is not always about the majority or numbers. Sometimes if there are 2 upright narrators, but one is more credible than the other, so we take the more upright narrator over the other. Finally, number 5. Hidden defects, or ilal. This is one that only the top scholars can catch. A hadith may look flawless with good narrators, connected chain, and still have a hidden flaw. And there are literally more than 100 types of defects or ilal. A classic example is tadlis, or causing confusion, where a narrator uses an unknown nickname to report the name of a teacher to quietly hide his real teacher's name. So for example, if we have a narrator named Salim, who is unreliable because he forgets, and so the student of this teacher doesn't want to say that he learned a certain hadith from Salim, who's known to forget. So instead, he says that he learned it from Abu Ahmed, which is an unknown nickname for Salim, so that people do not dismiss his hadith. But naturally, an experienced scholar is able to find this flaw and grade the hadith properly. So these are the basic criteria of grading a certain hadith. Any hadith has gone through these 5 criteria, and the grading of the hadith depends on how well they fare against these 5 measures. So, in other words, let's put that into practice. If one hadith checks all 5 criteria, upright narrators, flawless precision, an unbroken chain, no anomalies, no hidden defects, we call that hadith sahih or authentic. However, if the narrator's memory is reliable but not quite flawless, and everything else still checks out, we then call this hadith hasan or good. It is still true and correct, but is not the same degree as sahih. Now, if the hadith fails on one or several of these 5 criteria, like that the narrator has a weak memory, or there is a broken chain, there is an anomaly or defect in it, then we call it da'if, which means that this hadith cannot be confirmed. But if there is a known intentional liar in the chain of transmission, we call it mawdu' or fabricated, and that is the worst kind. So this type of hadith is not allowed to be cited as a real one, and is actually a very serious thing to do so. The only exception is to cite it in order to warn people that it is false. Now, here is the part that most people don't know. Grades are not always final. But how? Well, if we, for example, have 2 separate Hasan hadiths, same matn or content, but they have completely different chains of narrators. In this case, they reinforce or corroborate one another, and they are then upgraded to the sahih or authentic. But then we call it sahihun lighayrihi, or authentic through corroboration. Even a da'if hadith is not automatically discarded because it can climb a degree higher and become a hasan if that specific hadith comes through multiple different weak chains, and those weak chains patch each other's gaps. In this case, it becomes hasanun lighayrihi, or hasan through corroboration. Now, this is how scholars grade a hadith, but they also have another classification according to how many people transmitted them at each stage. And there are mainly 2 categories: mutawatir and ahad. Mutawatir means that the hadith has been transmitted by a large number of people at every level, that it would be logically impossible for all of them to have conspired on a lie. As for ahad, it is anything that doesn't reach that scale of mutawatir. So it could be narrated by 3 people, for example, sometimes 2, and sometimes at a given stage, just 1 narrator. So does that mean that a ahad hadith is weak? No, not at all. In fact, one of the most famous ahadith that you probably know by heart, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, deeds are but by intentions, was carried by a single narrator at each stage for the first several generations. One person passing it to one person, passing it to one person. But every single one of those narrators met all 5 conditions perfectly. So the hadith is impeccably sahih. And that is the true beauty of the science of hadith. It is not just a collection of historical quotes or people passing down stories based on how beautiful or motivational a quote is. It is an incredibly objective, highly sophisticated, rigorous system. These scholars essentially invented the science of historical peer review, just to protect the words of the Prophet, peace be upon him, from any alteration, whether it was an intentional lie or just an innocent mistake. So, next time you read a hadith and see that it is graded as Sahih or Hasan, you now know exactly the intense scrutiny that every single quote had to go through just to reach you today. If this lesson helped you clarify these terms for you, make sure to hit that like button and share this video with someone who might benefit from it. Don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, and I will see you next time, inshallah. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out my latest books with their video courses if you want to learn the Quran in Arabic or properly learn its tajweed. Check out the links in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time, inshallah.